When it arrives in a crate, you know it'll be great. Actually, we don't know that, but we're gonna take a look today. This is actually, y'all know the drill. Origin PC likes to send their computers in a crate. You can do crate services with that, it's pretty awesome. But this is their 3500X chassis build here. It's their latest Genesis PC. It's been a while since we've taken a look at this. Anything with the Genesis line. They've kind of changed it quite a bit in terms of what chassis they're using, what parts they're using. But this is intended to be kind of like the absolutely end-all, be-all gaming PC. So it features a 9800X3D. It features a 4090 FE card, or 96 gigabytes of 6000 megatransfers Vengeance RGB RAM. We'll take a look at what the timing is going to be on that. MP700 Pro SE 2 terabyte drive with a Samsung 4 terabyte 990 Pro secondary drive. So we have 6 terabytes of storage in this thing. And of course, with it being their top of the line Genesis, not to be confused with the old Phil Collins band, it should allow us to play anything we want and be fully water cooled, theoretically. So this is why I really like the crating service with brands that offer. So it's a water cooled PC. You definitely want to keep it as supported as possible. So as you can see, we've got the foam in here that is perfect sizing to the crate, which gives it some suspension. So the PC has some room to sort of move. The inside of it is not all damp. So that's a good sign because obviously we do not want it to leak in transit. I'm not sure if I'm gonna have to fill this one. Sometimes Origin PCs come empty after they've done their initial leak test and stuff because of transit. So I'm not sure what I'm gonna find inside this. But like I said, this Genesis PC is using Corsair's 3500X chassis, which is kind of their latest iteration of, geez, okay, this is, eat, sleep, game, repeat. Wow, that's heavy. These are all the accessories that come with it. All the extra cables and crap. I think this is gonna be some of the extra Corsair screws and stuff for the water cooling. All the extra mounts and stuff that come with the water cooling stuff. So this is obviously, you're gonna be using all their Hydro X stuff. I like this though. I like that they give you the extra mounts. That way if you do ever change anything in the future, you have the mounts to be able to mount down. Look at that. So yeah, as you can see, it's not that big of a tower. That's what's cool about this chassis too though, is it actually accommodates eATX as well. So we gotta take off the condom. Oh, look at that. That did ship fully filled. So you can see it's protected with Instapak, which is nice. So that's the expansion foam that will fill in all the voids and stuff in there. Now you wanna be careful. You don't wanna just yank this stuff out because you could potentially, if it worked itself kind of around a piece of tubing, you don't wanna yank the tubing out. So, there we go. I like the sleeved tubings. This is something they've been doing more of, is actually just sleeving their normal clear tubing. So it gives it kind of a sleek sort of a look right there. Red coolant. So this is actually a 2.1 inch IPS screen. And, oh, check it out. They're using these fans as intakes. Yay, PJ listened. Hi, PJ. So, I mean, everything looks pretty straightforward, right? I mean, so you can see right here, we have it still has the plastic on it too, so we've got some peel that we can do. Are you ready? Now it's used. So we have an LCD on the block, an LCD on the pump, because these are their Link products. And then, yeah, everything looks pretty straightforward. 360 rad on the back wall, 360 rad on the top as exhaust. So we have two 360 millimeters worth of cooling for a 9800X3D and a 4090. Way more than enough cooling for this build. But one of the things that, in my opinion, Origin PC's always been among the best at is their cable management. Let's see if they make me a liar. Nope. Oh, check this out. Oh my God, a drain. You don't know how happy this, in the past they didn't put drains. So you usually got to creatively figure out how to maintenance, drain, and fill the system if you ever needed to. So here we go. A drain right there. So nice to see. Look at this cable management. No matter how hard I try, I cannot get my systems to look this good. I'm telling you, I don't know what type of freaking voodoo magic they're using. Now here's the thing, there is absolutely zero give. There is no slack on this whatsoever. But because they're using their shift PC, or their shift PSU, this is awesome for cable management, because you can see it allows all the cables to point this way, so you can get them all nice and managed here, as long as you can get your side panel on. But this is awesome. I love the fact that they included a drain valve. Thank God for that. Just kind of sits up there out of the way. Okay, well, you know what we gotta do next? We need to get this sucker turned on. We need to get it over there, get it under some load, because I'm curious what these temps are gonna be like. But anyway, for the rest of it, because it was starting to come apart because I was pulling on it. So you can see our top rad right here, 360 exhaust, running again the Corsair radiator. USB-C, combo jack for headphone mic, 2 USB 3.0, and then our power button. So I feel pretty good that this survived transit without any sort of leaking, just by how much fluid is still in the reservoir right there. Okay, so let's just power it on, let it kind of retrain and stuff. All right, so it's finished its training. We're gonna boot into the OS. I wanna point out the fact that these fans aren't turning. It's very possible, and I need to see when we get into IQ what the setting is. They could have these fans set to 0 dB. So that's the thing about, the fact that we have 3 exhausts right now on the top and 1 exhaust in the back that's running. If there's not under any sort of load, there wouldn't be any reason for those fans to be running, honestly, because there's enough passive cooling, and there they go. So as you can see, they clearly are 0 dB fans, but now that we just loaded up into the OS and IQ just started up, as you can see, the fans are running now. And these are intakes, so these are providing cool air into the chassis for any of the passively cooled stuff that still needs air. For instance, our RAM needs airflow. Our VRM at the top obviously needs some airflow. Our heatsink over our M.2 clearly needs airflow. Our PCH. There's still a lot of devices in here that need airflow. And that's the thing I think people forget. Like, just because you're water cooling your GPU and your CPU, there's no more air sort of splashing around over here to pick up some of the heat and blow directly on these passively cooled components. So it's important to still have intakes that are constantly going, in my opinion, on water-cooled builds. But yeah, now that it's started up, you can see that we clearly have our fans and such running. I do like that sort of, it's not really a marquee, but it's more or less just a red LED kind of a pinwheel going around. I like that because Origin's colors are red, so I guess they're really kind of leaning into that. Now, if we wanted to change the display, obviously on any of the, and we've talked about this in the past, like when these components first came out, but you can change to animated GIFs, as you can see, small videos. You can have sensor panel information showing GPU temp, CPU temp, but as you can see out of the box, they have it set to just sort of the Origin animation logo that they made. That's exactly the right size for these screens. So I'm not gonna change any of the colors right now because I sort of have it set up, but I think by now you guys are kind of aware about how IQ works. Any of the connected devices, especially the link devices, you can change their lighting configs right here. Like we could show sensor data if we wanted, coolant temp if it's monitoring it anywhere, CPU temp, GPU temp, load. It's all kinds of different stuff that we can change it to. But I'm really curious as to the cooling aspects of the 3500X. So give me a few moments here. I'm gonna get our GPU loop able to run, and I'm also gonna get us some Cinebench R23 on here and see how that does under load. It's a 9800X3D, it's not a high watt part, with way more than enough cooling than we need for that CPU, so I expect that to allow us to even have some overclocking headroom available to it, and then we'll see how the GPU does under load over time. So I'm gonna do some thermal testing on this right now. The fan profile right now in IQ is set to balanced. All the fans are set to balanced. That includes the pump speeds, everything. So we're gonna leave it as is out of the box. Right now it is pretty much dead silent, even though all the fans are turning right now. So for the GPU test, I'm gonna let Speedway run for 30 minutes. That's gonna fully load up the GPU in a ray tracing test. So we'll do Speedway for 30 minutes. And then I'll also do Cinebench. And what I'll do is I'll chart that over time so we can see how the temperature's climbing, how long it took for it to normalize. We'll come back and analyze those real quick. But I'm kind of interested to see, I think they'll stay pretty cool considering the fact that those fans are actually running intakes on the motherboard wall, which will give better temperatures and airflow available to the internal fan. I know that might seem counterproductive to some people, thinking that the radiator temperature is going to heat up the air coming in, which will make these parts run hotter. But that's actually beneficial versus having everything running exhaust which would mean that we're dealing only with negative pressure. So we've talked about that a million times. Maybe it's time to do some actual comparisons where we do intake versus exhaust and see what the true temperature impact is over time. But anyway, we're gonna go ahead and start this test. We'll come back with the charts and we'll see how the Genesis 3500X performs with some of the highest end parts we can throw in there for gaming. Okay, so it's actually the next day. Spent quite a bit of time doing some temperature tests on this. A couple different configurations. So we tested the CPU with like Cinebench R23 on a 30-minute loop, which will put way more heat into the CPU than any like realistic normal test will. And then we did the 4090 FE in Speedway and 3D Mark, which is a ray tracing test. That was also on a 30-minute loop. And then did it with out-of-the-box settings. As I've already stated, the out-of-the-box fan profile in IQ is set to balanced, which is actually very, very quiet. These are very loud fans. So these are the QX120s, which go up to about 2200 RPM. So at idle, when it's not doing much in the balance profile, they stay around 500 RPM and they'll speed up to about 1000 RPM under load. So you can see they're only pushing about 50% of the airflow that they possibly could when they're only ramping up to about 50%. So let's take a look at the R23 test first. You can see here, I showed the GPU on here as well, which is kind of interesting. The reason why I show the GPU on here as well as the CPU when we do GPU test is because of the common misconception that by putting one part under load, you're just going to heat up all the other parts in the loop. And actually, if we take a look at the GPU temps, the hotspot and the junction temperature, you can see the temperatures actually came down as I ran Cinebench R23, mostly because the CPU fan profile ramps up the fans when the CPU sees load, so that actually cooled off the GPU more. But you can see our CPU pretty much maxed out at 83 degrees Celsius, which is significantly below its 95 Celsius max temperature that's available to it. So a nice benefit to the 9800X3D, as we've already talked about, is because of the inverted or flipped design now, so that the cache is underneath the CPU, means better cooling for the CPU. So now we can actually run full clocks, faster clocks than the previous generation, and keep it cooler. So it ran 5250 megahertz all core for the entire test. It didn't fluctuate. But yeah, you can see how the GPU actually reduced its temperature because the fan sped up and the GPU wasn't under load. So now if we take a look at our GPU test, this is Speedway. You can see our junction temperature on the GPU topped out at about 55 C. That sounds pretty hot. It's really not. If you've ever water cooled a 4090, there's such high core density, and because of the fact that it runs up to 1.1 volts, typically 1.05, but 1.1 volts is possible with these GPUs. There's a lot of focused heat. So the days of running GPUs under full load in the low 40s, high 30s, in a realistic temperature in 22 degrees Celsius in this particular instance, they're kind of over. So seeing the temperature stay in the low 50s is kind of nice. But to be honest, the air coolers are so good these days. You can see the air coolers also with adequate cooling stay in the high 50s, low 60s. So about a 10 C benefit to running water cooling versus the big air-cooled cards. Now the FE does run warmer than the bigger triple fan cards, so we actually dropped about 20 C by having a water-cooled card in here versus having an air-cooled card. So you can see our hotspot temperature also was just kind of hovering around the 65 to 66.6 or so. Yeah, 66.6. Do with that number as you will. But the nice thing about it is we take a look at the actual clock speeds. Because of that, they start the test at 2670, and then we lose one bin approximately 8 or so minutes into the test, and we drop down to 2655. That's simply because it just means that the temperature crossed whatever the intersection was for the next boost bin table based on temperature. So remember, GPU boost uses temperature and power limit to determine if it can self-boost itself even farther. Now, as the temperature gets warmer, stability goes down. So there has to become a point where it crosses that threshold where it goes down a bit. Now, a bin is 15 megahertz. Every bin is 15 megahertz when it comes to NVIDIA GPUs on the modern GPUs. So it used to be 13, really weird number. Anyway, I digress. So that just means that as we cross about that 54 degrees Celsius mark, that's where it comes down one bin. Now, one thing I wanted to do also was I wanted to do a test to see how much improvement there is if I ran on the extreme profile. Now the extreme profile for the fans in IQ, these particular fans, bring it up to about 1050 RPM at idle and then they can jump up to about 1500 to 1800 RPM under load. Now, one thing we need to keep in mind is IQ is really only using the CPU to determine whether or not it should ramp up the fans. So if I run the CPU test, the fans actually ramp up quite a bit, even in the balanced profile. However, in the extreme profile, they don't really ramp up that much more because of the fact that the temperature curve is just more aggressive with the extreme profile where they ramp up sooner. But the overall RPMs pretty much stayed the same with the CPU under full load. The GPU, however, does not really trigger the fans to really ramp up. Now you can go into IQ and you can configure it to use GPU as well to ramp up the fans. So I wanted to see what the difference would be if I just put on the extreme profile and didn't touch any of the trigger points or touch any of the sensors to tell it what logic to use. I just switched the fan profiles. So if we take a look at those temperatures, you can see the blue lines are the extreme profile, and we dropped about 4C. Now it doesn't sound like a lot. In fact, it's kind of not. So we went down to about 51 degrees Celsius on the junction temperature, and then we capped out at right about 63, 64 on the hotspot temperature. Now keep in mind, the hotspot temperature can also trigger throttling, but for the most part, it's going to use the junction temperature when it comes to those P states, as I mentioned, when it comes to power and temperature state to deal with our frequency. So what did that mean for our frequency? I actually had to zoom in on the chart here. It started at 2000, just so you could see the only difference is we didn't drop down that one boost bit. It only dropped down that one boost bit at the end of the test when I stopped it, and that was already at the 30-minute mark. So you can see it went to that 2670 the entire time, and it didn't drop that 15 megahertz. Now we did trade off a lot of noise for that. So actually I'm pretty impressed with the balance profile given the fact that you could still very barely hear the system, especially over the air conditioning running in this room, that we are costing ourselves 15 megahertz over the course of 30 minutes. This is one of those instances where you can actually really err on the side of noise and not have to worry about leaving any real performance on the table compared to the extreme profile. So I think by having the side radiator as intake, getting nice cool air coming in from the side, and also feeding more positive pressure to the rest of the chassis, means that the temperatures in this loop clearly are of no concern when it comes to the CPU and the GPU. So there you go, that's the Genesis 3500X from Origin/Corsair. I do really like the sleeving on here though. I've never done that. I actually should probably look at doing this myself. It actually adds some rigidity to the tubing as well, because they do use a thin wall flexible tubing when they do this. You can also get this in like a rigid tube if you want, but I see no reason to spend the extra cost on the rigid tubing. The nice thing is by having flexibility, if for some odd reason I needed to unseat the GPU, I could do that with soft tubing. So I like the idea that for a first-time buyer maybe getting into water cooling to go with the soft tubing option, simply because it gives you some flexibility to be able to move things around if you need to. But I love the fact that it's just a mid-tower chassis that's got two 360 millimeters worth of cooling, a 9800X3D, and then once you take the gargantuan coolers off of the 4090 cards, you can see they're actually quite small. So it means that you can fit a full open loop like this and not have it be crammed inside the system. I mean, we could still fully access everything. If we wanted to add another M.2 in here, we could easily access the M.2 covers, add those. We can still easily gain access to our M.2 slot cover right here. We still have room for more RAM if we needed to expand that in the future. Also, too, I didn't even notice this. I like the fact that they're using the supplemental 8-pin power right here on the side of the 24-pin, as well as the 2 up here on the top. Now, a 4090 is not going to saturate the motherboard. In fact, the 4090 is going to be barely pulling any power from the motherboard whatsoever. But that's just a nice to have. If your motherboard has the connections and the power supply has extra plugs, there's no reason why you shouldn't plug those in to get cleaner power going to your components. But anyway, I want to say a huge thanks to Origin for sending us this PC to take a look at. They love sending me their open loop options because they know that I'm quite an enthusiast when it comes to open loop cooling. Admittedly, I have not done nearly enough open loop builds this year, so I want to change that going into 2025. But I'll put a link down in the description below so you guys can check out the full array of systems. We were getting full boosting out of this, temperatures were good, the cable management, as you saw in the back. I will never be able to, I don't know how they're doing it. Like, I really don't know how they're getting the cable links just right to get that like perfect little conduit of cable running through there. I mean, I have tried. I don't know how many times I've tried to do something like this myself. I just can't. I suck. I really do suck at doing this. But you can have a system that looks like that and sucks less than something I would build by heading to Origin PC and checking out their systems. Now, the elephant in the room. This unit costs $6,839. Now, if you consider the fact that it's a 4090 FE, those are still hard to get. I don't know how much you're getting them for. The fact that we have the extremely hard to find still 9800X3D, probably one of the most expensive X870E motherboards you can buy, the Crosshair Extreme, full open loops, 4 terabyte NVMe, plus a 2 terabyte NVMe for 6 terabytes, and 96 gigabytes of RAM. It's a very expensive computer, no doubt. It's going to be forward facing for quite a while. In fact, this actually kind of, I guess it does meet the specs for Indiana Jones, but it kind of shows you as games are progressing and becoming more future facing when it comes to the kind of hardware they're looking for you to have to run max settings. We're finally in that new generation of a lot of games are requiring 32 gigabytes or higher. So if you're running like an old DDR4 system that's got 16 gigabytes of VRAM or system RAM, you're going to start finding in the future, you need to at least upgrade your system RAM and stuff. So we'll be doing a video in the near future here where we talk about the most bang for buck upgrades you can do in your system to make yourself ready for the latest games without having to go and do a complete new purchase or a complete rebuild. But if you're shopping for a system off the shelf that just dominates any game you can throw at it, obviously systems like this exist. Now the Genesis does come in a lot of different sizes and flavors. It's not oh, this is the only model you get for $6,800. It's got a severe price premium on it because of the fact that it's pre-built with open loop and all that sort of such. But you can go in and configure these as you guys see fit and based on your needs. So I'll put a link down in the description below. You guys can go and check out the Genesis lineup. There's obviously other PCs in other lineups within the Origin PC ecosystem. So you guys can probably find a system that meets your needs and your budget. Or you can literally just max out all the checkboxes like they kind of did with this one, and this is what you get. Anyway, sound off down below how you guys feel about this sleeved tubing. It kind of has this automotive feel. Like I almost feel like we need to do this, but we need to have like AN fittings on the end and do an actual automotive themed build here at some point in the future. I guess we could call that our sim PC rig, but we've gone down that avenue. I guess it's time to actually follow through on one of those builds I keep talking about wanting to do. 2025 is going to have a lot more builds in it, I promise, especially now that I'm going to have my shop ready. I really need to focus on the dirty shop for the PC case mods and stuff that I really want to do. And then obviously we have our lab here for doing clean builds. Anyway, I'm on a tangent. Sound off down below how you guys feel about this system. Obviously it's not for the faint of heart when it comes to price, but it's definitely for those that want something that looks super custom like YouTubers are always building, but you can literally one-click purchase it if you wanted, or customize it to meet your needs. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.